October 15, 2019, Hartford Superior Court, the State of Connecticut versus Michael Harrison. Judge Patricia Blackwell presiding. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the back wall. This case had everything: sex, lies, betrayal, murder. The media was calling it the suburban nightmare. Michael sat at the defense table in a gray suit, looking thinner than he had just 2 months ago. Dark circles under his eyes, hands folded on the table to stop them from shaking. To his right sat Robert Fitzgerald, reviewing notes one last time. Across the aisle, Assistant District Attorney Catherine Morrison shuffled through her files. She was known as the Hammer, a prosecutor who never lost. Her conviction rate was 97%. This was supposed to be an easy case for her. It wouldn't be. Judge Blackwell called the court to order. The state may begin with opening statements. Ada Morrison stood, buttoning her blazer, and approached the jury. 12 faces stared back at her 8 women, 4 men. Normal people called to decide an extraordinary case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Morrison began, her voice strong and clear. This case is about jealousy, rage, and ultimately murder. She paused, letting the words sink in. Michael Harrison had everything: a beautiful home, 2 children, a successful career, but he also had a wife who no longer loved him, a wife who found that love in the arms of his best friend, David Chen. Morrison walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. When Michael discovered this affair, he didn't do what most rational people would do: file for divorce, seek therapy, move on with his life. No, Michael Harrison decided that if he couldn't have his perfect life, nobody could. She clicked a remote. Photos appeared on the screen behind her: David's crime scene, the blood, the destroyed office, the baseball bat. Several jurors winced. On September 7, 2019, Michael Harrison took a baseball bat, his own baseball bat, and went to David Chen's house. He confronted David, and when David refused to do what Michael wanted, Michael beat him to death. Morrison paused again, letting the horror of those words register. The evidence is overwhelming. Michael's fingerprints on the murder weapon, his DNA at the crime scene, his hair in the victim's office, scratches on his arms matching skin cells found under the victim's fingernails, and most damning of all, his motive. She turned to face Michael directly. Michael Harrison murdered David Chen in cold blood, and over the next few days, we will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Morrison sat down. Several jurors were already looking at Michael with suspicion. Judge Blackwell turned to the defense. Mr. Fitzgerald, your opening statement. Robert Fitzgerald stood slowly. He was in his 60s, gray hair, worn suit. He looked like someone's grandfather. That was intentional. Juries trusted grandfathers. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, Fitzgerald began, his voice softer than Morrison's but somehow more compelling. What the prosecution just told you is a story. A neat, clean story that ties everything up with a bow. But as we all know, real life is rarely neat and clean. He walked to the defense table and picked up a thick folder. This folder contains evidence the prosecution doesn't want you to see. Evidence of a conspiracy. Evidence that my client, Michael Harrison, was systematically framed by multiple people who had far more to gain from David Chen's death than he did. Fitzgerald approached the jury, his expression grave. Yes, Michael discovered his wife was having an affair. Yes, he was angry. Yes, he confronted David Chen. But ladies and gentlemen, being angry doesn't make you a murderer. And in this case, Michael Harrison's anger made him the perfect scapegoat. He clicked his own remote. New images appeared. Sarah and Marcus at restaurants, text messages, financial records. You're going to hear testimony about a woman, Michael's wife, Sarah, who was not having one affair, but 2. You're going to hear about a man, Marcus Webb, who stood to gain a promotion if David Chen was out of the picture. You're going to hear about deleted text messages, fabricated evidence, and a frame-up so elaborate it would make a Hollywood screenwriter jealous. Fitzgerald turned to face the prosecution table. The state wants you to believe that Michael Harrison, a man with no history of violence, suddenly snapped and committed a brutal murder. But what they can't explain is why someone with so much to lose would be so incredibly sloppy. Why leave fingerprints? Why use his own bat? Why leave hair and DNA everywhere? He turned back to the jury. Because he didn't do it. Someone wanted you to think he did. And by the end of this trial, we will show you exactly who that someone is. The opening statements alone are incredible. If you're hooked, drop a #I umlaut in the comments. And please subscribe, this trial is about to get absolutely wild. Part 4 is where everything changes. The prosecution called their first witness, Detective Maria Rodriguez. Detective Rodriguez, Ada Morrison began. Can you walk us through what you found at the crime scene? Rodriguez pulled out her notes. On September 8th at approximately 8:47 a.m., we received a call from Jennifer Chen, the victim's wife. She had returned home from an overnight trip and found her husband deceased in his home office. What was the condition of the scene? The office showed signs of a violent struggle. Furniture was overturned, papers scattered, blood spatter on the walls, floor, and ceiling. The victim was lying face down near his desk with massive head trauma. And the murder weapon. We found a Louisville Slugger baseball bat approximately 6 feet from the victim's body. It had blood and hair on it matching the victim's DNA. Whose bat was it? Forensic analysis revealed fingerprints belonging to Michael Harrison. When we traced the bat's ownership, we confirmed it was purchased by Mr. Harrison in 2017. Morrison entered the bat into evidence. The jury stared at it, some with visible disgust. Detective, did you find any other evidence linking the defendant to the scene? Yes, we found multiple hairs matching Mr. Harrison's DNA. We found skin cells under the victim's fingernails that matched Mr. Harrison. And we found traces of Mr. Harrison's cologne on the victim's clothing. Did the defendant have any injuries consistent with being in a physical altercation? Yes, when we questioned Mr. Harrison the next day, he had fresh scratches on his right forearm. And how did he explain those scratches? He claimed his daughter's cat scratched him 2 days prior. Did you investigate that claim? We did. The daughter does have a cat. However, the scratches on Mr. Harrison's arm were consistent with human fingernails, not cat claws. They were longer, deeper, and showed a pattern consistent with defensive wounds. Morrison let that sink in. No further questions. Fitzgerald stood for cross-examination. Detective Rodriguez, you mentioned the bat had only Mr. Harrison's fingerprints on it. Is that correct? That's correct. No other prints, not even smudges? No. Isn't that unusual? If someone used a bat to commit a violent murder, wouldn't there be smudges from gripping it tightly? Rodriguez hesitated. Possibly, but the defendant could have worn gloves. Could have, but you found no gloves at the scene, correct? Correct. And you found no gloves in Mr. Harrison's possession. Correct. Detective, you also mentioned finding Mr. Harrison's hair at the scene. How many hairs? 7 individual hairs. 7 hairs. In David Chen's office. Is it possible those hairs transferred naturally? Mr. Harrison visited David's office regularly for work meetings. It's possible, but the location of the hairs suggested a recent presence. Suggested, not proved. Objection, Morrison called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Blackwell said. Fitzgerald changed tactics. Detective, did you investigate anyone else as a potential suspect? We investigated all possible leads. Did you investigate Sarah Harrison, the defendant's wife? We questioned her, yes. Did you investigate Marcus Webb? We questioned him as well. Did you investigate Jennifer Chen, the victim's wife? Rodriguez paused. Mrs. Chen was out of town at the time of the murder. That wasn't my question. Did you investigate her? We verified her alibi. But did you investigate her as a potential suspect? Check her finances, her communications, her relationships? Mrs. Chen was not considered a primary suspect. Why not? She stood to inherit $2 million from her husband's life insurance policy. Morrison shot up. Objection, relevance. Your Honor, Fitzgerald said calmly, the defense is entitled to show that other people had stronger motives than my client. I'll allow it for now, but get to the point, Mr. Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald turned back to Rodriguez. Detective, isn't it true that you focused exclusively on Michael Harrison from the moment you learned about the affair? We followed the evidencia euros. The evidence, or the narrative, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided my client was guilty and then cherry-picked evidence to support that conclusion. That's not true. No further questions. The prosecution's second witness was Dr. Sharma, the medical examiner who performed David's autopsy. Dr. Sharma, Morrison began, what was the cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the skull resulting in cerebral hemorrhaging. The victim sustained multiple strikes to the head, at least 7 distinct impacts. 7 strikes. That suggests sustained violence, doesn't it? Objection, Fitzgerald called, leading. Sustained. Morrison rephrased. In your professional opinion, does the pattern of injuries suggest a momentary loss of control or sustained, deliberate violence? The injuries are consistent with sustained violence. Each strike required significant force. This wasn't a single blow in the heat of the moment. This was repeated, intentional striking. Can you estimate the time of death? Based on body temperature, rigor mortis, and stomach contents, I estimate death occurred between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. on September 7th. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. Fitzgerald approached for cross-examination. Dr. Sharma, you said the attacker used significant force. What does that tell you about the attacker? That they were likely physically strong and highly emotional. Does it tell you anything about their height? Sharma paused. The angle of the wound suggests the attacker was approximately the same height as the victim, perhaps slightly shorter. David Chen was 6 feet tall. Michael Harrison is 5'9". That's 3 inches shorter. Would you describe that as slightly shorter? It's within the range, yes. But it's also consistent with someone who is 5'10", 5'11", or even 6 feet tall, correct? Correct. So the attacker could have been the same height or taller than David Chen. Yes. Dr. Sharma, did you find any defensive wounds on David Chen's body besides the skin under his fingernails? No significant defensive wounds on his hands or arms. Isn't that unusual? If someone is being beaten with a baseball bat, wouldn't they instinctively raise their arms to defend themselves? In most cases, yes. But there were no broken fingers, no fractures to the forearms, no bruising on the hands consistent with trying to grab the bat. No. What does that suggest to you? Possibly that the first blow incapacitated the victim, preventing him from mounting a defense. Or possibly that the victim knew his attacker and didn't see the attack coming. Objection, Morrison said. Speculation. Withdrawn, Fitzgerald said with a slight smile. No further questions. The defense is fighting back. Are you Team Michael or do you think he's guilty? Comment below. And don't forget to like and share this video. We're only halfway through the trial and it gets intense. Day 2 of the trial began with Ada Morrison calling her star witness, Sarah Harrison. Michael's wife, the woman at the center of everything. Sarah walked to the witness stand wearing a conservative black dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. She looked like a grieving widow, though David Chen wasn't her husband. She was sworn in and sat down, her eyes deliberately avoiding Michael's gaze. "Mrs. Harrison," Morrison began gently, "I know this is difficult for you. Thank you for being here." Sarah nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Can you tell the jury about your relationship with David Chen?" "David and we were in love," Sarah's voice broke. "I know it was wrong, I was married, but Michael and our marriage was already over. We were just going through the motions." "When did your relationship with David begin?" "June of 2018. At my daughter's birthday party, we had too much to drink, we started talking, and it just happened." "Did your husband know about the affair?" "Not until August of this year. He found out and he was furious, absolutely furious." "Did he threaten David?" "Yes, multiple times. He told me he was going to make David pay. Those were his exact words." "Objection," Fitzgerald stood. "Hearsay." "Your Honor," Morrison countered, "this is a statement made by the defendant to the witness. It's an admission, not hearsay." "I'll allow it overruled." Morrison continued, "Mrs. Harrison, did your husband ever become physically violent with you?" Sarah nodded, tears flowing now. "Yes. In August, after he found out about David, he grabbed me, pushed me against a wall. Told me I had ruined his life, and I would pay for it." Michael shot up. "That's a lie, I never touched her." Judge Blackwell banged her gavel. "Mr. Harrison, control yourself or you will be removed from this courtroom." Fitzgerald put a hand on Michael's shoulder, forcing him back into his seat. "Did you report this incident to police?" Morrison asked. "No, I was scared. Scared of what Michael might do if I made things worse." "Mrs. Harrison, on the night of September 7th, where were you?" "I was at my sister Jessica's house in Rhode Island. I'd been staying there since moving out of our home." "Can anyone verify that?" "Yes, my sister, her husband. I was there all evening." "Did you have any contact with David Chen that night?" "No, the last time I spoke to him was September 5th. "What did you discuss?" "He told me Michael had confronted him at work. He was scared. He said Michael had threatened to destroy him to make sure everyone knew about the affair. David was worried about what Michael might do." "No further questions?" Fitzgerald stood for cross-examination, and his expression was like stone. "Mrs. Harrison, or should I say Mrs. Liar?" "Objection," Morrison jumped up. "Counsel is being inflammatory." "Sustained. Mr. Fitzgerald, keep it professional." "My apologies, Your Honor." Fitzgerald didn't sound apologetic at all. "Mrs. Harrison, you testified that you and David Chen were in love. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Were you also in love with Marcus Webb?" Sarah's face paled. What?" "Marcus Webb, your other lover. The one the prosecution conveniently forgot to mention. Were you in love with him too?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Morrison looked shocked. Even Judge Blackwell leaned forward with interest. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said weakly. Fitzgerald pulled out a stack of photos. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter defense exhibits A through G. These are surveillance photographs taken by private investigator Patricia Delgado between August 20th and September 5th. He showed the photos to the jury. Sarah and Marcus at restaurants, holding hands, kissing in a parking garage. "Still don't know what I'm talking about, Mrs. Harrison." Sarah's composure cracked. That was different." "Different how? You were sleeping with two men at the same time. Your husband's best friend and your husband's boss." "Objection." Morrison was on her feet. "The witness is not on trial here." "Your Honor," Fitzgerald said calmly, "the witness's credibility is directly relevant to this case. If she lied about one affair, what else is she lying about?" "Overruled. The witness will answer." Sarah glared at Fitzgerald. Yes, I was involved with both of them, so what? So you lied under oath about your relationship with David being special. You lied about being in love. You were using both men, weren't you? No. You were using Marcus for money and using David for, what? Revenge against your husband. That's not true. Fitzgerald pulled out more documents. These are credit card statements. Hotels, dinners, designer clothes, all paid for by Marcus Webb. Aren't these your charges, Mrs. Harrison? Sarah didn't answer. And these text messages between you and David recovered from cloud backups show you complaining about Michael constantly, mocking him, laughing about how clueless he was. That doesn't sound like love to me. That sounds like contempt. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face, but they looked different now. Angry tears, not sad ones. You hated your husband, didn't you? Fitzgerald pressed. Yes, Sarah hissed. Yes, I hated him. He was boring and predictable, and he could never give me what I wanted. And what did you want? Money, freedom, a life that wasn't suffocating. The courtroom went silent. Even Morrison looked stunned. Fitzgerald let the words hang in the air for a long moment. Mrs. Harrison, if Michael went to prison for murdering David, you would inherit everything in the divorce, wouldn't you? The house, the savings, his pension. Sarah realized her mistake. That's not why. You stood to gain everything from David's death and Michael's conviction, and you had the means to frame him. Isn't that right? No, I didn't kill David. I loved him. You just testified that you hated your husband for being boring. Now you're saying you loved David. Which is it, Mrs. Harrison? Do you love anyone? Or do you just use people? I'm done answering your questions, Sarah said, standing up. Sit down, Mrs. Harrison, Judge Blackwell ordered. You're excused when I say you're excused. Sarah sat back down, her entire demeanor changed. The grieving almost widow was gone. In her place was something cold and calculating. No further questions, Fitzgerald said, returning to his seat. As Sarah left the witness stand, she shot Michael a look of pure hatred. But Michael didn't look angry anymore. He looked sad. Because he finally understood. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd built a life with, had never really existed at all. Day 3 of the trial began, with the defense calling its witnesses. First up, Patricia Delgado, the private investigator. Fitzgerald walked her through her findings, the surveillance photos, the deleted text messages, the evidence of Sarah's 2 affairs. But then he asked the question that changed everything. Ms. Delgado, during your investigation, did you discover anything unusual about the night of September 7th? Yes, I obtained security footage from a gas station near David Chen's home. And what did that footage show? At 8:42 p.m., approximately 25 minutes after Mr. Harrison was arrested at Riverside Park, a vehicle was seen driving past the gas station toward David Chen's house. What kind of vehicle? A silver Lexus SUV, license plate Alpha Bravo Charlie 4279. Do you know who owns that vehicle? Yes, it's registered to Marcus Webb. The courtroom exploded. Morrison shot to her feet. Objection, this is the first we're hearing of this. Your Honor, Fitzgerald said, we disclosed this evidence in discovery yesterday as soon as we obtained it. Judge Blackwell reviewed her notes. The objection is overruled. Continue. Ms. Delgado, you said this was at 8:42 p.m. What time was David Chen's death estimated? The medical examiner said between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. So Marcus Webb's car was near the crime scene, right in the middle of that window. Yes. Did Mr. Webb mention this to police? According to his statement, he claimed he was home all evening. Fitzgerald turned to the jury. So we have Marcus Webb lying about his whereabouts, driving near the victim's house during the time of the murder, and he just happens to be having an affair with the defendant's wife. The same wife who stood to gain everything from David Chen's death and Michael Harrison's conviction. He paused. Sounds like a conspiracy to me. Objection, Morrison was furious now. Counsel is testifying. Withdrawn, no further questions. Morrison approached for cross-examination, but she looked rattled. Ms. Delgado, this gas station footage. It shows a vehicle, not the driver, correct? Correct. So you can't definitively say Marcus Webb was driving? No, €. Yes or no? No. And the vehicle was just driving past. It didn't turn into David Chen's neighborhood. The camera angle doesn't show where the vehicle turned. So for all we know, Mr. Webb was just driving home and happened to pass that gas station. It's possible, but the route doesn't make sense. Mr. Webb lives in the opposite direction. Morrison frowned but pressed on. Ms. Delgado, you were hired by the defense. You're being paid to find evidence that helps Mr. Harrison. Isn't that right? I'm being paid to find the truth. But the defense is paying you. Yes. So you have a vested interest in this outcome. I have a vested interest in justice. No further questions. But the damage was done. The jury had seen Marcus Webb's car near the crime scene at the time of the murder. Reasonable doubt had been planted. MARCUSWEBB. Did you see that coming? Comment below, do you think Marcus killed David? And please subscribe because Part 5 reveals even more shocking twists. We're not done yet. After 3 days of testimony, it was time for closing arguments. Ada Morrison went first. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense wants you to believe in a grand conspiracy. They want you to imagine elaborate frame-ups and secret plots, but the truth is much simpler. She walked along the jury box. Michael Harrison discovered his wife was cheating. He confronted his best friend, and in a moment of rage he killed him. The evidence proves it. His bat, his fingerprints, his DNA, his scratches, his motive. Yes, there are other people in this story who behaved badly. Sarah Harrison was unfaithful. Marcus Webb was inappropriate. But being a bad person doesn't make you a murderer. The defense showed you a car driving past a gas station and wants you to believe it's evidence of a conspiracy. But there's no proof Marcus Webb even drove to David Chen's house. No proof he entered. No proof he was anywhere near the crime scene. Michael Harrison had means, motive, and opportunity, and the evidence proves beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty of murder. Morrison sat down. Fitzgerald stood for the defense's closing. Members of the jury, my colleague wants you to believe this case is simple, but nothing about this case is simple. He walked to an easel and pulled out a timeline. Let's review what we actually know. At 8:17 p.m., Michael Harrison was arrested at Riverside Park. At 8:42 p.m., Marcus Webb's car was photographed near David Chen's house. At 9:00 p.m., Michael was released on bail. At some point between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., David Chen was murdered. The prosecution wants you to believe Michael rushed from the police station to David's house immediately after being released and committed murder. But they have no witnesses, no surveillance footage, no evidence placing Michael at that house that evening. What they do have is evidence that was planted. A bat with suspiciously perfect fingerprints and no smudges, hair that could have been transferred at any time, scratches that look like they came from a cat. And they have motive, but not for Michael, for Sarah Harrison and Marcus Webb. Fitzgerald counted on his fingers. Sarah inherits everything if Michael goes to prison. Marcus gets rid of a romantic rival and a professional competitor. They both had access to Michael's house where the bat was stored. They both had opportunity, and they both lied to police. The prosecution's case requires you to believe that Michael Harrison, a man with no history of violence, suddenly became a calculated killer. but it also requires you to believe he was simultaneously smart enough to premeditate murder and dumb enough to leave evidence everywhere. That doesn't make sense. What makes sense is that two people conspired to frame an innocent man, and the evidence supports that conclusion. Fitzgerald turned to face Michael. Michael Harrison is not a perfect man. He made mistakes, but he's not a murderer, and convicting him would be a miscarriage of justice. He turned back to the jury. When you go into that deliberation room, I ask you to consider one thing: reasonable doubt. If there's any doubt in your mind, any possibility that someone else committed this crime, then you must acquit. And based on the evidence presented, I believe there is more than reasonable doubt. There is substantial evidence pointing to another suspect. Michael Harrison deserves justice, David Chen deserves justice, and the real killer needs to be held accountable. Thank you. October 20th, 2019, Day 5 of the trial, 2:47 p.m. The jury had been deliberating for exactly 38 hours. Michael Harrison sat at the defense table, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Robert Fitzgerald placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens," Fitzgerald whispered, "we fought hard, you need to know that." Michael nodded, but he couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. "All rise, the jury has reached a verdict." This is it, the moment that would define the rest of Michael Harrison's life. Judge Blackwell entered and took her seat. "Please be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict." The jury foreman, a middle-aged black woman named Carol Jenkins, stood up. "We have, Your Honor." "Will the defendant please rise?" Michael stood, his legs barely supporting him. Fitzgerald stood beside him. "Members of the jury, have you reached a unanimous verdict in the case of the state of Connecticut versus Michael Harrison?" "We have, Your Honor." The bailiff took the verdict form from Carol and handed it to Judge Blackwell. She read it silently, her face revealing nothing. Then she handed it back to the bailiff, who returned it to Carol. "Will the foreman please read the verdict?" Carol cleared her throat. Michael could hear his heartbeat thundering in his ears. "In the case of the state of Connecticut versus Michael Harrison, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we the jury find the defendant." Time seemed to stop. Michael thought about Emma and Jake, about never tucking them in again, about growing old in a prison cell. "Not guilty." The courtroom exploded. Michael's knees buckled. Fitzgerald caught him. Behind them, Michael's mother burst into tears. Sarah Harrison, sitting in the gallery, went pale. She stood up and rushed out of the courtroom. "Order!" Judge Blackwell banged her gavel. "Order in this court." Ada Morrison sat motionless, staring at her notes in disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Judge Blackwell continued, "thank you for your service. Mr. Harrison, you are free to go. This court is adjourned." Another gavel bang. And just like that, it was over. Michael turned to Fitzgerald, tears streaming down his face. "We won. We actually won." "You're innocent," Fitzgerald said, gripping Michael's shoulders. The jury saw the truth. But as Michael walked out of that courtroom a free man, he knew something the jury didn't. The case wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The media frenzy outside the courthouse was insane. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. "Michael, how do you feel? Are you going to sue for wrongful prosecution? What do you want to say to Sarah?" Fitzgerald shielded Michael as they pushed through to the car. "No comment. Mr. Harrison has no comment at this time." They drove to Fitzgerald's office in silence. Once inside, Michael finally spoke. "What happens now?" "Now," Fitzgerald poured them both a drink. "Now you go home to your kids, you rebuild your life, you move forward." "But David's killer is still out there." "Michael, the police are euros." "The police aren't going to do anything. They closed the case. They think I got away with it on a technicality. That's not true. The jury acquitted you because the evidence pointed to reasonable doubt. Robert, I need to know who killed David, not just for justice, but because whoever framed me, they're still out there, and they might come after me again. Fitzgerald studied Michael for a long moment. What are you planning? I'm planning to find the truth, with or without your help. Michael, that's dangerous. If you start investigating on your own euros. Then what? I'll look guilty. I already looked guilty. It didn't stop me from being innocent. Fitzgerald sighed. If you're going to do this, at least do it smart. Keep Patricia Delgado on retainer. Document everything. And for God's sake, don't do anything illegal. Michael finished his drink. No promises. Michael is free, but the mystery isn't solved. Who killed David Chen? Comment your theories. And subscribe, because Part 5 is about to reveal the investigation that Michael does on his own, and what he discovers will shock you. Michael spent the first few days, after the trial, reconnecting with Emma and Jake. They'd stayed with his mother during the trial. Now they were home, and Michael held them like he'd never let go. "Daddy, are you going away again?" Emma asked one night at bedtime. "No, sweetheart, Daddy's staying right here." "Promise?" "I promise." But even as he said it, Michael knew he was lying, because he couldn't rest until he found David's killer. On October 25th, Michael met with Patricia Delgado at a coffee shop. "I need you to keep investigating," Michael said. "I need to know what really happened that night." Patricia pulled out a laptop. "I never stopped investigating, and I found something interesting." She turned the screen toward Michael. It showed phone records. These are Marcus Webb's cell phone records for September 7th. He made 3 calls that night, one at 7:45 p.m., one at 8:15 p.m., and one at 9:30 p.m. Who did he call? The first call was to David Chen's house. It lasted 4 minutes. Michael's eyes widened. He called David the night he died. Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. The second call was to Sarah's cell phone. It lasted 12 minutes. Sarah was supposedly at her sister's house in Rhode Island. She was, I verified that, but the call went through. What about the third call? Patricia's expression darkened. The third call was to a burner phone. We can't trace who owned it, but the call lasted only 30 seconds. A burner phone? Why would Marcus need a euros? Michael stopped. Unless he was coordinating with someone. That's what I think, and there's more. Patricia pulled up bank records. I got access to Marcus Webb's financial records through, let's say, creative means. On September 10th, 3 days after David's death, Marcus transferred $50,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. $50,000 for what? That's what we need to find out. But payment that size that soon after a murder, that's not coincidence. Michael sat back, his mind racing. So Marcus called David the night he died, then called Sarah, then called someone on a burner phone, then paid someone $50,000 3 days later. Sounds like he hired someone to kill David. But why? What did Marcus have to gain? Patricia closed her laptop. That's what we need to figure out, and I think I know where to start. Where? Jennifer Chen, David's widow. Michael and Patricia showed up at Jennifer Chen's house on October 27th. Jennifer answered the door looking exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair uncombed. She'd lost weight. "Michael," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "Jennifer, I need to talk to you about David." "I have nothing to say to you." "Please, just 5 minutes." Jennifer hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. They sat in Jennifer's living room, the same room where Michael and David used to watch football games and drink beer. Now it felt like a mausoleum. "Jennifer, I didn't kill David," Michael said. "The jury said you didn't. That doesn't mean I believe them. I know you're angry, I know you're grieving, but I need you to hear me out. Patricia spoke up. Mrs. Chen, we have evidence that suggests someone else killed your husband, someone who paid to have it done. Jennifer's eyes flashed. Who? Marcus Webb. Jennifer's reaction was strange. She didn't look shocked, she looked resigned. You already knew, Michael said quietly. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know for sure, but I suspected. How? Jennifer stood up and walked to the window. For a long moment, she just stared out at her backyard. Then she spoke, her voice hollow. David was going to leave Sarah. He told me 3 days before he died. We'd had a long talk about our marriage, about his affair, about everything. And he said he'd made a mistake. He said Sarah was manipulative and cruel, and he wanted to end it. Michael felt his chest tighten. He was going to end it. Yes, he was going to tell Sarah it was over. And he was going to tell you everything about the affair, about Jake's paternity, all of it. He said you deserved to know the truth. Did Sarah know he was going to end things? Yes, David called her on September 6th and told her. She was furious, started screaming at him over the phone. I heard the whole thing. What did she say? Jennifer turned to face Michael, tears streaming down her face. She said, if you leave me, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you lose everything. And David laughed at her. He said, you can't touch me. You have no power here. And then Sarah said something that made David go quiet. She said, we'll see about that. Marcus knows people, dangerous people, and he's not going to let you walk away either. The room went silent. Why didn't you tell the police this? Michael asked. Because I was scared. Sarah threatened me too. After David died, she called me and said if I said anything about their conversation, she'd make sure I looked guilty. She had evidence that I'd been having my own affair with Marcus's business partner, Robert. She said she'd make it look like Robert and I killed David for the insurance money. Patricia leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, we need you to testify to all of this. I can't, she'll destroy me. She already destroyed you, Michael said gently. She destroyed all of us, but we can stop her. We can make sure she pays for what she did. Jennifer wiped her tears. Even if I testify, it's just hearsay. Sarah never directly said she'd have David killed. No, Patricia said, pulling out her phone, but I have something that might help. She played an audio recording. It was scratchy but clear enough. Sarah's voice, Marcus, we need to talk about the problem. Marcus's voice, what problem? Sarah, David, he's going to tell Michael everything. He's going to ruin us. Marcus, so what do you want me to do about it? Sarah, you know what needs to be done. You have connections, use them. Marcus, Sarah, if you're asking me toa euros. Sarah, I'm not asking, I'm telling you. Handle it, or I'll make sure everyone knows about the Henderson deal, about the fraud, about everything. The recording ended. Michael stared at Patricia. Where did you get that? I bugged Sarah's phone 2 weeks ago. Technically illegal, so it won't hold up in court, but it's proof. We need to go to the police, Jennifer said. No, Michael said firmly. The police won't do anything. They closed the case. We need more than a recording. We need a confession. How are we going to get that? Patricia asked. Michael smiled grimly. By giving Sarah exactly what she wants. A confession. Michael has a plan. Drop a eth y umlaut. Yen if you're ready to see Sarah finally get caught. And please subscribe. Part 6 reveals Michael's trap and you do not want to miss I. Michael's plan was simple but risky. He would tell Sarah that he had evidence proving Marcus killed David. He'd offer to sell her that evidence for $500,000. And when she came to make the exchange, he'd record her confession. This is insane, Fitzgerald said when Michael told him. You're basically blackmailing her. I'm giving her rope to hang herself. And if it doesn't work, if she just calls the police, then I'm no worse off than I am now, but I don't think she will. Sarah's desperate. She knows the walls are closing in. On October 30th, Michael sent Sarah a text from a burner phone. "I have evidence Marcus killed David, evidence that will send you both to prison. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at 9 p.m. Bring $500,000 cash, or I go to the police." Sarah responded within 5 minutes. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows everything. 9 p.m. Don't be late." The next evening, Michael arrived at Riverside Park at 8:30 p.m. Patricia had set up recording equipment in Michael's car and wired him with a hidden microphone. "Remember," Patricia said, "get her to talk about the murder. Get her to admit she knew Marcus hired someone. Get specifics." "I know." "And Michael, be careful. If she's capable of having David killed, she's capable of anything." Michael waited by the river overlook, the same spot where he'd been arrested for assaulting Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on him. At 9:04 p.m. Sarah appeared. She was alone, carrying a black duffel bag. "Michael," she said coldly, "I should have known it was you." "Hello, Sarah. You said you have evidence. Show me." "First, I want to know something. Why David? Why not just divorce me?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Because divorce would have been messy, expensive. I would have gotten half of everything maybe, but if you went to prison for murder, I'd get it all, the house, the savings, your pension, everything. So you had David killed and framed me for it." "I didn't kill anyone, I just pointed Marcus in the right direction." "And Marcus hired someone." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You're recording this, aren't you?" "No, I just want the truth." "The truth?" Sarah stepped closer. "The truth is that you were a stepping stone, Michael. A safe, boring stepping stone to a better life. And when you stopped being useful, I needed you gone." "Did Marcus actually hire someone to kill David, or did he do it himself?" Sarah smiled, and it was the coldest thing Michael had ever seen. "Marcus is too much of a coward to kill anyone, but he knows people who will do anything for money. He made one phone call and the problem was solved. And the frame job, planting my bat, the DNA evidence. Marcus had a key to your house. I gave it to him. It was easy to take the bat, use it, and leave it at David's. And the DNA, please. You'd been to David's office 100 times. Your hair was everywhere already. We just made sure the police knew where to look." Michael felt sick. "And what about Jake? Is he even David's son?" Sarah's smile faded. "No, Jake is yours. I lied about that. I wanted to hurt you." "You wanted to hurt me. Sarah, you tried to send me to prison for life." "And I almost succeeded," Sarah said. "If that stupid private investigator hadn't found that gas station footage, you'd be rotting in a cell right now." "So what happened to the hitman, the person Marcus hired?" "He got paid and disappeared. $50,000, cheap price for freedom, don't you think? And you're just going to walk away, live with what you did?" Sarah shrugged. "I already am. David's dead. You're acquitted, but your reputation is ruined. Marcus and I will wait a respectable amount of time, then we'll be together. We'll probably move to California, start fresh." "You really think you're going to get away with this?" "I already have, Michael. There's no evidence, no proof, just your word against mine. And who's going to believe you? The man who was just on trial for murder." That's when the floodlights came on. Police cars surrounded the park from every direction. Detective Rodriguez's voice came over a megaphone. "Sarah Harrison, stay where you are. You're under arrest." Sarah's face went from confident to terrified in an instant. "What did you do?" she hissed at Michael. Michael opened his jacket, revealing the wire. "I got you to confess. Every word, recorded and transmitted live to the police." Sarah lunged at Michael, but officers were already rushing in. They tackled her to the ground, cuffing her hands behind her back. "You son of a bitch," Sarah screamed as they dragged her away. "You set me up." "No," Michael said calmly. I got justice." Within hours, the police arrested Marcus Webb. In his panic, Marcus confessed everything: how Sarah had pressured him to solve the problem, how he'd contacted a man named Vincent Russo, a known criminal with ties to organized crime, and paid him $50,000 to kill David Chen, how they'd stolen Michael's bat, waited until Michael was arrested at the park, then Vincent had gone to David's house and beaten him to death, how they'd planted evidence to frame Michael. All of it. Vincent Russo was arrested in Florida 2 days later. He'd been living under a fake name, but his fingerprints were in the system. He eventually confessed too, hopping for a reduced sentence. The dominoes fell fast. On November 5, 2019, Sarah Harrison was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, and obstruction of justice. Marcus Webb was charged with solicitation of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. Vincent Russo was charged with first-degree murder. All three would go to trial in 2020. Michael attended every single day of their trials. He watched as Sarah tried to play the victim, claiming she'd been manipulated by Marcus. He watched as Marcus tried to claim he'd been coerced by Sarah. He watched as Vincent Russo showed no remorse whatsoever. On March 15, 2020, all three were found guilty. Sarah got 25 years to life. Marcus got 20 years to life. Vincent Russo got life without parole. Justice finally had been served. March 15, 2020, the guilty verdicts were in. Sarah, Marcus, and Vincent were all convicted. Michael Harrison sat in the courtroom gallery and felt nothing. He'd expected relief, joy, some sense of closure. But all he felt was emptiness. Because David was still dead, his marriage was still destroyed, his reputation was still tarnished, and worst of all, his children had lived through a nightmare no child should ever experience. Justice had been served. But at what cost? This is the story of what happened after the headlines faded, after the cameras stopped rolling, after everyone else moved on. This is Michael Harrison's journey from victim to survivor, from broken to whole. And if you've made it this far with us, thank you. This final chapter is the most important one. The day after the verdicts, Michael returned to the house on Maple Street. The white house with the pool in the backyard. The house that was supposed to represent his American dream. Now it just felt like a tomb. Emma and Jake were at his mother's house. Michael had asked for one day alone to process everything before bringing them home. He walked through the empty rooms. The living room where Sarah used to read to the kids. The kitchen where they'd had family dinners. The bedroom where he'd slept next to a woman who was plotting his destruction. Every corner held a memory. Most of them were now poisoned. Michael sat on the edge of his bed and let himself cry, really cry, for the first time since this nightmare began. He cried for David, the friend he'd lost, despite everything. He cried for his children, the innocence they'd lost. He cried for himself, the man he used to be. And when the tears finally stopped, Michael made a decision. He couldn't stay in this house. Too many ghosts, too much pain. It was time to start over. This part gets real and raw, folks. If you know someone who's been through trauma, share this video with them. Sometimes healing comes from knowing you're not alone. And please, subscribe to Unbound Stories SR. We're almost at the end. With Sarah in prison, Michael filed for full custody of Emma and Jake. It should have been simple. The mother was a convicted criminal, the father was innocent. But nothing in Michael's life was ever simple. Sarah's parents, Emma and Jake's grandparents, filed for custody too. Your Honor, their attorney argued in family court, Michael Harrison was acquitted of murder, yes, but he was still arrested. He was still on trial. The children were traumatized by seeing their father in handcuffs on the news. Michael's attorney, Robert Fitzgerald, fired back. My client was framed by their daughter. He's the victim here, not the villain. But the judge was cautious. She ordered a psychological evaluation of Michael and a home study before making a decision. The psychologist's name was Dr. Rachel Martinez, late 30s, kind eyes, patient demeanor. She met with Michael 6 times over 3 weeks. "Tell me how you're sleeping," Dr. Martinez asked in their first session. "I'm not," Michael admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the courtroom, or David's crime scene photos, or Sarah's face when she confessed." "Have you experienced any flashbacks?" "Yes. Sometimes I'll be playing with the kids and suddenly I'm back in that interrogation room, or in the jail cell. It feels so real I can't breathe." "That sounds like PTSD, Michael, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's very common in people who have been through what you've been through." "Am I going to lose my kids because I have PTSD?" Dr. Martinez shook her head. "Not if you get help. The court wants to know that you're stable and capable. Seeking therapy shows responsibility, not weakness." Over the next few weeks, Michael opened up to Dr. Martinez in ways he'd never opened up to anyone. He told her about his first divorce, about the poverty, about the desperate need to prove himself that had driven him for years. He told her about the loneliness of his marriage to Sarah, how he'd known, deep down, that something was wrong but had been too afraid to face it. He told her about the guilt, the crushing, overwhelming guilt. "Guilt about what?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "About David. I hated him for what he did, but he didn't deserve to die, and part of me wonders, if I'd handled things differently, would he still be alive?" "Michael, you are not responsible for David's death. Sarah and Marcus are. You were a victim of their conspiracy." "But if I'd been a better husband to Euros—" "Stop, right there." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "You're doing what a lot of trauma survivors do. You're taking responsibility for things that were never your fault. Sarah's choices were her own. Her affairs, her conspiracy, her crimes, none of that is on you." "Then why do I feel so guilty?" "Because guilt is easier than grief. And you're grieving, Michael. You're grieving your marriage, your friendship with David, your old life. All of that loss is real and valid." Michael wiped his eyes. "How do I stop feeling like this?" "You don't stop. You learn to carry it, and over time it gets lighter, I promise." Section 3. The Evaluation RESULTS for 5730-50600. On April 30th, 2020, the family court reconvened to hear Dr. Martinez's evaluation. Sarah's parents sat on one side of the courtroom. Michael sat on the other. Dr. Martinez took the stand and delivered her findings. "Your Honor, I've completed comprehensive evaluations of both Mr. Harrison and the maternal grandparents. I've also observed Mr. Harrison's interactions with Emma and Jake on multiple occasions." "And what are your conclusions?" the judge asked. "Mr. Harrison shows symptoms of PTSD, which is expected given the trauma he's experienced. However, he's actively engaged in therapy and making good progress. He's employed, financially stable, and has a strong support system." "What about his ability to parent?" "I observed Mr. Harrison with his children on 4 separate occasions. He's patient, attentive, and emotionally present. Emma and Jake are clearly bonded to him and feel safe in his care." "And the grandparents?" "The maternal grandparents are loving and well-intentioned. However, they continue to maintain that their daughter was wrongfully convicted. They've made statements suggesting they believe Mr. Harrison is guilty of murder." The judge frowned, even after the trial, after Sarah's confession. "Yes, Your Honor. They believe Sarah was coerced into confessing. This presents a problem because Emma and Jake need to be in an environment where the truth is acknowledged, not denied." The judge reviewed her notes for a long moment. "It's this court's opinion that children need stability and truth. Mr. Harrison has demonstrated both." She looked at Michael. "Mr. Harrison, I'm awarding you full physical and legal custody of Emma and Jake. The maternal grandparents will be granted supervised visitation twice a month." Michael exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. His kids were his, finally, officially, permanently. Sarah's parents looked devastated, but they didn't argue. Deep down, even they knew this was the right decision. After the hearing, Michael went to his mother's house to pick up Emma and Jake. When he walked in, Emma ran to him. "Daddy, are we going home?" Michael picked her up and held her tight. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. All of us. All of us forever." Jake, now almost 2 years old, toddled over and wrapped his arms around Michael's leg. Michael scooped him up too, holding both his children close. "I love you guys so much," he whispered, "and I'm never going to let anything bad happen to you again, I promise. If you're not crying right now, check your pulse. Drop a circumflex currency I umlaut in the comments if this story is hitting you right in the feels. And subscribe if you haven't already. We're heading into the final stretch." Michael sold the house on Maple Street in May 2020. He couldn't afford to keep it anyway. The legal bills from 2 trials had drained his savings. But more importantly, he didn't want to. That house represented a lie, a false dream. He bought a smaller house in a different town. 3 bedrooms, modest yard, no pool. But it was theirs, clean, new, untainted by the past. He also quit his job at the investment firm. Too many memories, too many people who looked at him differently now, some with pity, some with suspicion, some with that uncomfortable curiosity reserved for people who have been through something sensational. Michael started his own financial consulting business, working from home. It was scary at first, no guaranteed paycheck, no benefits, but it gave him flexibility to be there for Emma and Jake. And slowly, painfully slowly, they built a new normal. Emma started kindergarten in the fall. She made friends. She laughed again. Jake learned to talk. His first full sentence was, "I love Daddy." Michael continued therapy with Dr. Martinez. Twice a week at first, then once a week, then bi-weekly. The nightmares didn't stop immediately, but they became less frequent, less intense. Michael learned his triggers: courtroom TV shows, news stories about murder trials, even the smell of the cologne he used to wear. He learned to avoid them or manage his reactions. He learned that healing isn't linear. Some days were good. Some days he'd break down crying while making the kids lunch. That was okay. He learned to be gentle with himself, to accept help, to say "I'm not okay" when he wasn't okay. And most importantly, he learned that being broken doesn't mean being defeated. In September 2020, 6 months after the trials ended, Michael got a phone call from an unexpected person. Jennifer Chen, David's widow. "Michael," she said, her voice hesitant, "I know this is strange, but could we meet for coffee?" They met at a small cafe copyright in Hartford, both nervous, both carrying the weight of their shared trauma. "I don't even know where to start," Jennifer said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "Why did you want to meet?" Michael asked gently. "Because I've been in therapy, working through everything, and my therapist said I need to make peace with the past. That includes making peace with you." "Jennifer, you don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. I blamed you for so long. Even after the trial, part of me wondered if maybe you'd been involved somehow. But that wasn't fair. You lost as much as I did, maybe more. I lost my wife, you lost your husband." "I lost my husband, but he wasn't. He wasn't a good husband, Michael. The affair with Sarah wasn't his first. I'd known for years that David was unfaithful. I just looked the other way because it was easier than dealing with it." Michael was quiet, letting her talk. "And I'm realizing now that I wasted years of my life on a marriage that was already dead, just like you did. We were both living lies, Michael. We just didn't know it." So what do we do now? Jennifer smiled sadly. We survive, we move forward, and maybe we help each other do that. Over the next few months, Michael and Jennifer developed an unlikely friendship. They'd meet for coffee once a month, talk about their kids. Jennifer had 2 teenage daughters. Talk about their therapy, talk about how hard it was to trust people again. It wasn't romantic. Neither of them was ready for that. Maybe they never would be. But it was healing. They were 2 people who understood each other's pain in a way no one else could. And that understanding was its own kind of medicine. In December 2020, Michael received a letter. It was from Sarah, written from the women's correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. Michael stared at the envelope for 3 days before opening it. When he finally did, this is what it said. Michael, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. Sorry for who I became. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About my choices. About how I justified them to myself. About how I convinced myself that I was the victim in all of this. I wasn't the victim, you were. I told myself you were boring, predictable, that you didn't give me what I needed. But the truth is, you gave me everything a partner should give: stability, love, loyalty. And I threw it away because I wanted excitement more than I wanted integrity. I destroyed you. I destroyed David. I destroyed our children's sense of safety. I don't know if there's redemption for someone like me. The prison chaplain says there is, but I'm not sure I believe in redemption anymore. I just wanted you to know that you didn't deserve any of this. Emma and Jake didn't deserve this. Even David didn't deserve what happened to him. I hope someday you can build a life where I'm just a cautionary tale you barely remember. You deserved better than me. Sarah. Michael read the letter 3 times. Then he took it to his next therapy session. How do you feel about this? Dr. Martinez asked. I don't know. Part of me is angry. Part of me is sad. Sad for her. Sad for all of us. She destroyed her own life too. She'll be in prison until she's 50. She'll miss watching Emma and Jake grow up. She'll never have the life she wanted. Do you forgive her? Michael thought about that for a long time. No, he said finally. I don't forgive her. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I don't hate her anymore either, and maybe that's enough. Dr. Martinez nodded. That's very healthy, Michael. Forgiveness isn't required for healing. Letting go of hate is. Michael never wrote back to Sarah, but he kept the letter. Not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of how far he'd come. The healing process is so powerful. If this story has moved you, please share it. Someone in your life might need to hear this message. And subscribe to Unbound Stories SR. We're almost at the very end. March 2022, 2 years after the convictions. Michael Harrison was sitting in the audience at Emma's school play. She was playing a tree in the production of The Wizard of Oz. She was very excited about being a tree. Jake sat on Michael's lap, squirming and asking when Emma was going to appear. Soon, buddy, she's coming soon. Michael looked around at the other parents, normal people living normal lives. None of them knew his story. He was just another dad at a school play. And that anonymity was the greatest gift. His business was doing well. He'd built a solid client base and was making enough to support his family comfortably. Not the lavish lifestyle he'd had before, but enough. Emma was thriving. She made good friends at school. Her teacher said she was kind and creative and a joy to have in class. Jake was in preschool now, obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced he was going to be a paleontologist when he grew up. Michael's PTSD was better. He still had bad days, still had moments when the past crashed over him like a wave, but they were further apart now, more manageable. He'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee here and there with women from dating apps. It was terrifying and awkward, and he wasn't very good at it. But it was progress. After the play, Emma was spectacular as a tree. Obviously, Michael took the kids out for ice cream. "Daddy, did you see me?" Emma asked, chocolate ice cream smeared across her face. "I saw you, sweetheart. You were the best tree in the whole forest." "I was the only tree," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Which makes you the best by default." Emma giggled. Jake giggled because Emma was giggling. And Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness necessarily, not the absence of pain. But peace, the quiet certainty that they were going to be okay. In June 2022, Michael was contacted by a documentary filmmaker named Lisa Rodriguez, no relation to Detective Rodriguez. She wanted to make a documentary about his case. Michael's first instinct was to say no. He'd spent 2 years trying to move past the nightmare. Why would he want to relive it on camera? But Lisa was persistent. "Michael, your story matters, not because it's sensational, though it is, but because it shows how the justice system can fail innocent people, how easy it is to be framed, how trauma affects families. I don't want my kids to grow up seeing this documentary and learning all the details. We'd be respectful. We wouldn't show their faces. We wouldn't use their names. This would be your story told from your perspective." Michael thought about it for weeks, talked to Dr. Martinez, talked to Jennifer, even talked to Robert Fitzgerald. Finally, he agreed. The documentary, titled Framed, The Michael Harrison Story, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in April 2023. Michael didn't attend. He watched it at home alone after putting the kids to bed. Seeing his story laid out like that, the affairs, the murder, the trial, the conspiracy, was surreal. But what struck him most were the interviews with other wrongfully accused people. A woman who'd spent 10 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. A man who'd been exonerated by DNA evidence after 15 years. A father who'd lost custody of his children due to false allegations. Michael realized his story wasn't unique. The details were different, but the pain was the same. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing his experience, he could help someone else feel less alone. The documentary was nominated for an Emmy. Michael still didn't watch it again. But he kept the award in his office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that his pain had purpose. So where are all the players in this story now, in 2024? Sarah Harrison is serving her 25 to life sentence at York Correctional Institution. She's eligible for parole in 2037. She's taken college courses in prison and works in the prison library. According to recent reports, she's a model prisoner. Whether that's genuine change or just survival is anyone's guess. Marcus Webb is serving his 20 to life sentence at Osborne Correctional Institution. He was attacked by another inmate in 2021 and spent 3 months in the medical unit. He's filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. He'll be eligible for parole in 2035. Vincent Russo, the hitman who actually killed David Chen, is serving life without parole at Northern Correctional Institution, Connecticut's maximum security facility. He'll die in prison. Patricia Delgado, the private investigator, retired in 2023. She wrote a book about the case called The Frame, How I Helped Prove Michael Harrison's Innocence. It's currently being adapted into a limited series. Robert Fitzgerald, Michael's attorney, continued practicing law until his retirement in 2023. He won several more high-profile cases and is considered one of Connecticut's finest defense attorneys. He and Michael remain close friends. Jennifer Chen remarried in 2022 to a man named Thomas, a high school history teacher. Her daughters are now in college. She runs a support group for families of murder victims. She and Michael still meet for coffee occasionally. Emma Harrison is now 9 years old. She's in 4th grade. She plays soccer and takes piano lessons. She doesn't remember much about the trial. She was only 4 when it happened. Michael plans to tell her the full story when she's older, when she's ready. Jake Harrison is now 6 years old and in 1st grade. He has no memory of the events of 2019. To him, his childhood has always been just him, Emma, and Daddy, which is exactly how Michael wants it. And Michael Harrison. Michael is 48 years old now. He's still running his consulting business, still living in the modest house in the quiet town, still going to therapy, though now just once a month. He's dating someone. Her name is Angela. She's a kindergarten teacher at Emma's school. They've been seeing each other for 6 months. She knows his whole story. She doesn't care. The past doesn't define you, Angela told him on their 3rd date. How you deal with the past defines you, and you dealt with it with grace. Michael doesn't know if it'll turn into something serious. He's not rushing anything. But for the first time since Sarah, he can imagine a future with someone. He still thinks about David sometimes, wonders what would have happened if David had ended the affair sooner, if he'd been honest from the beginning. If. But those thoughts don't consume him anymore. Michael has learned to live with uncertainty, with unanswered questions, with the reality that some things can never be fixed or understood, only accepted. We're almost at the end, folks. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think, if it's made you feel, please like this video, share it, comment your thoughts. Let's honor Michael's journey together. On the 5-year anniversary of David's death, September 7th, 2024, Michael did something he'd never done before. He visited David's grave. The cemetery was quiet. The September air was cool. David's headstone was simple. David Chen, 1977-019, beloved son and father. Jennifer had chosen not to include husband on the stone. Michael understood why. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, trying to figure out what to say. "Hey man," he finally said, feeling ridiculous talking to a stone. "It's been 5 years, feels like 5 decades. A breeze rustled through the trees. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if there's anything after this, but if there is, I want you to know I don't hate you anymore." Michael's voice cracked. "I did for a long time. I hated you for the affair, for betraying me, for hurting me. But then I realized, you didn't deserve what happened to you. Nobody deserves that." He wiped his eyes. "Sarah and Marcus took everything from both of us. Your life, my peace, our friendship. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I know you were going to come clean. Jennifer told me. I know you were going to end it with Sarah and tell me the truth. And I want you to know, I would have forgiven you eventually. It would have taken time, but I would have." Michael knelt down and placed a hand on the cold stone. "I hope wherever you are, you're at peace. And I hope you know that I'm trying to be at peace too." He stood up, took a deep breath, and walked back to his car. As he drove away, Michael felt something lift, not completely, but enough. Grief, he'd learned, never fully goes away. It just becomes part of who you are, a scar that aches in certain weather but doesn't prevent you from living. And Michael was living. Not just surviving, not just going through the motions. Actually living. If you're watching this and you're going through something difficult, whether it's betrayal, legal trouble, false accusations, or just life falling apart, Michael Harrison wants you to know something. You can survive this. It won't be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, when the weight of it all feels unbearable. But you can survive it. You can rebuild, you can heal, you can find peace again. Michael wrote a letter to himself after all of this was over. He keeps it in his desk drawer. He shared it with me for this documentary. Here's what it says. "Dear Michael, 5 years ago, you stood in a courtroom and heard the word guilty, and thought your life was over. It wasn't, it was just beginning. You learned things you never wanted to learn, that people you trust can betray you, that the justice system isn't always just, that your wife of 6 years was capable of pure evil. But you also learned things you needed to learn. You learned you're stronger than you thought. You learned your children are your reason to keep going, even when you want to give up. You learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. You learned that healing isn't linear. Some days you'll be fine, some days you'll fall apart, both are okay. You learned that your worth isn't defined by what happened to you, it's defined by how you responded. And you responded with courage. You didn't let Sarah's betrayal make you bitter. You didn't let the false accusation destroy your spirit. You didn't let the trauma steal your ability to love your children. You fought, you survived, you rebuilt. And now, 5 years later, you're okay. Not perfect, not healed completely, but okay. And okay is enough. Be proud of yourself, I know I am. Michael. So what can we learn from Michael Harrison's story? First, trust your instincts. Michael knew something was wrong in his marriage for months before he discovered the truth. He ignored his gut because he wanted to believe the best in Sarah. Sometimes the red flags we ignore are the ones that hurt us most. Second, document everything. Patricia Delgado's meticulous documentation, the surveillance photos, the phone records, the timeline, was crucial to proving Michael's innocence. In any legal battle, evidence matters more than truth. Third, the justice system is imperfect. Michael was almost convicted of a crime he didn't commit. The evidence against him looked overwhelming. If Patricia hadn't found that gas station footage, if Michael hadn't worn a wire to trap Sarah, he might be in prison right now. We want to believe that innocent people don't go to jail, but they do, and it's terrifying. Fourth, betrayal can come from anywhere. Michael was betrayed by his wife, his best friend, and his boss, the 3 people he trusted most outside his family. It's a reminder that we never truly know what's in someone else's heart. Fifth, healing takes time. It's been 5 years since David's murder and Michael still goes to therapy. He still has bad days. Trauma doesn't disappear just because time passes. It becomes integrated into who you are, and that's okay. Sixth, children are resilient. Emma and Jake went through something traumatic, but with love, stability, and honesty, age-appropriate honesty, they're thriving. Kids can survive almost anything if they have one adult who loves them unconditionally. Seventh, forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. Michael doesn't forgive Sarah, he probably never will, and that's his right. Forgiveness isn't required for healing. Letting go of hate is. Eighth, community matters. Michael survived because he had help. His mother, his lawyer, his therapist, his private investigator. Jennifer Chen, no one heals alone. Ninth, your past doesn't define your future. Michael was a man on trial for murder. Now he's just a dad. He built a new life from the ashes of the old one. You can too. And 10th, justice matters. Not revenge. Justice. Michael could have stayed silent after his acquittal. He could have let Sarah and Marcus get away with conspiracy. But he risked his safety to get that confession because the truth mattered more than his comfort. Folks, we've reached the end of Michael Harrison's story. If you've watched this entire video, all 6 parts, over an hour, thank you. Thank you for caring about this story. Thank you for going on this journey with us. Please do me a favor. Like this video, it helps other people find Michael's story. Subscribe to Unbound Stories SR. We tell true crime stories that matter, stories about justice, healing, and survival. Share this video. Someone in your life needs to hear this. Someone is going through their own nightmare and needs to know they can survive it. Comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me how this story affected you. Tell me your own story if you want. This community is here to support each other. And if you're going through something difficult right now, legal trouble, betrayal, trauma, please know, you are not alone. You can survive this, and there are people who will help you. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-790-97233, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 988 Legal Aid. Visit your local bar association for free legal help. Michael Harrison's story is extraordinary, but in some ways it's also ordinary. Betrayal happens every day. False accusations happen every day. People lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing every day. What makes Michael's story special isn't that he suffered, it's that he survived. He didn't let bitterness consume him. He didn't give up on love after being betrayed. He didn't stop fighting even when the odds were against him. And most importantly, he showed his children that even when the world falls apart, you can build it back up again. That's the real lesson here. Not that bad things happen, we all know that. But that you can survive bad things, and you can still build something beautiful on the other side. Michael Harrison isn't a hero. He's just a man who refused to let the worst moment of his life define him. And if he can do it, so can you. From all of us at Unbound Stories SR, thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, your story isn't over yet. Unbound Stories SR, where truth meets justice. Subscribe for more incredible true crime stories. Like, comment, share,